nobody knows our business better than we do, right? We live and breathe it every day, but we also only have like one data point of our business. VCs can be incredible partners if you can find the right people for your industry, for your product, for your space that believe the same things that you believe in. And they're very helpful in giving you a 30,000 foot view of the market.
Today, I met Valentina Ratner, who's the CEO and co-founder of AllSpice. While pursuing an MBA at Harvard, Valentina met Kyle Dumont, where they quickly realized that there isn't a GitHub for electronics engineers to collaborate with, and thus AllSpice was born. Today, we're going to go into more detail about what AllSpice is, how the collaboration process on their software works, and how they came up with the name. We live in a time where design and technology touch every aspect of our lives. But where did it all come from? Who designed it? How was it built and brought to market? What will it look like in a year, 2 years, 100 years? From the phones and smartwatches that help us in our day-to-day to the cutting-edge spaceships and 3D printers that are leading us into the future, modern design is constantly shaping the way we work, communicate, problem solve, and play. And every new design, big or small, starts with an idea and a bill of materials. I'm Magenta Strongheart, and this is The Bomb, where we talk to leading innovators in the tech world and celebrate the transformational power of design. Welcome to The Bomb, Valentina. Thank you so much for joining us today. Excited to chat with you in beautiful San Francisco. How are you doing?
Great. Thanks for having me. Super excited to be here.
Yeah, and we're at Studio 45. We have to give them a shout out because they let us use their space. We're going to be collaborating with them a little bit throughout the year, so love to be able to use their beautiful co-working space here. They have a shop in the back that I wish I could explore more, but that's not why we're here today. We're here today to get into AllSpice. So I would love to start out with just maybe like the elevator pitch. I feel like I have a pretty good idea of what AllSpice is all about, but I would love to hear it in your words, and then we can dive in a little deeper.
Yeah, absolutely. So at a very high level, AllSpice is a collaboration platform for hardware engineers. Think GitHub, but for electronics. So PCB schematics and bombs instead of text-based code. It's a combination of Git-based revision control with a central hub for digital collaboration, which would mean asynchronous design reviews or issue tracking and management all the way to releases, and with analytics and automation in the background.
Awesome. There's so much to, I think, get into as far as that goes. And I'd love to walk through kind of what a process might look like if two engineers are collaborating on your platform. But I did want to go back a little bit to kind of the origin story and foundation of AllSpice. I read a little bit, did a little bit of research about you and your co-founder. And it sounds like you guys have a shared background in engineering and product development, if I'm not mistaken. And so it really came of a place of you guys had dealt with these issues in your own work and saw this need for this kind of solution. Is that right?
Yeah. So I have a mechanical engineering background. My co-founder and our CTO, Kyle, has an electrical engineering background. So I always joke that we make one full stack hardware developer between the two of us. And we met in grad school in 2018. We were both in the first class of a dual degree program at Harvard, where you did an MBA and a Master of Science in Engineering Sciences. And before grad school, I was working at Amazon as a PM and working in large infrastructure projects and what you could think about as the physical backbone behind the online shopping experience. So think of all the warehouses, machinery, logistics, kind of the physical components that move packages to people's homes. And as part of that, I got to experience a little bit of the some of the pain points as you grow and scale an organization, especially for the hardware side, where there is a lot of still that happens on PDFs and Excel sheets and email threads with hundreds of people, or Post-it notes or screenshots on Paint. And as we were growing, I got the opportunity to get involved with internal software and building our own collaboration layer. And that was my kind of introduction to the world of software, which was eye-opening in the sense of it was incredible to see the impact it had in the projects that had native tools, where it made the quality of the projects go up, the timelines go down, all the way to the employee engagement and satisfaction was better. And also get a glimpse into how software build other software, right? And like what a developed infrastructure or ecosystem could look like, and being like, wow, why don't we have something like that, right? And it's a typical kind of skill to tool mismatch. As a hardware engineer, you're trained and you're very good at building hardware products. As a software engineer, you're trained and you build software products. So you can build your own software tools, and that ecosystem has like exponentially grown over time. And there's still tons of opportunity, but coming from like an outsider perspective, it's like they have a lot of great things going for them. Yeah. As a hardware engineer, typically you don't build your own software tools. It's not the skills that is your expertise. And a lot of it then it's lacking. So it was old tooling, or it was like not as great. And I got very, very interested at working at this intersection of what is software and hardware, like software for hardware or software in hardware looks like, and kind of bridging that gap, which is why I'm going back to grad school and enrolled in this dual degree program where I met Kyle. And call it coincidence, but we were in this dual degree program, the two of us, and our first class together. A professor assigned us to be partners for the project, like randomly. And I guess that we were lucky to find like the other person in this big school that was super passionate about hardware space and wanted to bring this innovation to it. So we started working together a few months after, and here we are.
So you had the idea that you wanted to work on a software solution when you went into this dual degree program. Is that right? Or did you kind of you knew you wanted to start some kind of business potentially in the future, and this was the space you had, an inspiring experience within?
Yeah, so I had a good understanding of the problem, but I didn't have a solution in mind yet. I didn't know what the product would look like or what the company will be, but I knew that I wanted to work at this kind of intersection space. And I had experienced a lot of the pain points coming into school. And when we enrolled, actually, one of the things that draw me to this particular program is that it is focused on this combination of technical skills with business skills, but at the early stage, not like multinational corporation, operations management, but more like innovation, right? New product development, R&D, early stage startups. And that was pretty interesting for me. And Kyle had the experience of building a hardware team and also building a software team. And that's kind of where the idea of like, wow, like, why isn't there a GitHub for electronics, right? Why isn't the equivalent of this for our teams? And it started as as a bit of an analogy of like what the GitHub for hardware could look like. And through our years in school, we did a lot of customer interviews, like talked to hundreds of engineers and try to hone down like what the solution to this problem would be. And what we found out was if you think about a hardware design cycle, there's like 5 or 6 blocks, and each company calls it something different. But at a very high level is something like you set the requirements, you coordinate with your team, you design something on a tool, you do some sort of analysis validation, you send it, you get it manufactured, you test it and analyze the results, and you start over through the cycle, right? When we ask engineers, what's the last reason your prototype failed, or what's the last problem that you had? What we found was a lot of the issues were happening at the collaboration or coordination level, where it wasn't as often that someone was like, you know what, that was the wrong power source or whatever. It was more of like, you know what, I sent this email and this person went on vacation and they never saw it and we ordered the wrong board.
Oh no.
Or like, oh, I accidentally like flipped the connector and then things didn't work out. So there was a lot of things like that were happening, which
falling
fell for
through
us.
The cracks at the team level.
Exactly. So they feel like a huge opportunity, which is like those are the things that we can automate and improve for these teams. Like there's a certain built-in like failure in R&D, right? Like it's very difficult to get like the perfect product right the first time.
Of course.
But there's a lot of things that could be like avoided, right? This kind of what I would call process flaws or communication gaps. Those are the kind of things that we wanted to kind of remove so that engineers can spend their time actually validating like the design portion of it, right? The creative part, and not like the administrative task playing Waldo, like what's new between this board and the last board.
Right. Can you spy the differences?
And it's crazy that we are building these incredibly sophisticated softwares, and a lot of it was still like very, very manual and error prone. And it's a lot of burden on like the engineers themselves for things that don't have necessarily as much value. Is like your time as an engineer is so much better spent like designing than like trying to catch up like this details for documentation or trying to remember what decision you made 6 months ago that turned into this board today not working, and things like that we want to kind of make a difference.
Absolutely. And so before we get any further, I have to ask, where does the name AllSpice come from? Why AllSpice?
Yes, it's a great question. So we get this asked a lot. So if you come from electronics, you're probably familiar with SPICE simulation tools, right? Mm-hmm. And there is several tools that are called something SPICE, like LT-SPICE or something else. And we wanted to take an approach of being a unifier and kind of be a platform for the industry where there's a lot more data transparency and interconnection and make it more of a hub. So we named it AllSpice. Since then, we don't focus on simulation today. We focus a lot more on the collaboration part. But it's kind of stayed there. It's a bit of an inside joke. If you're an electrical engineer, you find it curious and funny and you ask about it. If not, you think we sell food. That's not, that definitely has happened before. So it helps us kind of connect with our other audience and tell us if you're a good fit for our tool or not.
Absolutely. And keeps you unique, of course. So getting back to the idea of like a unifier and kind of connecting platform, I did see, that you're compatible with a lot of other commonly used tools for hardware developers and engineers. I guess it'd be great, helpful for the audience just to hear which tools you are compatible with and why that's necessary for, the ecosystem.
Mm-hmm. One of the decisions we made very early on was to build our product on Git. And when we say a Git-like platform for hardware, it's both an analogy and quite literally. We do use Git on the back end, and that's a protocol that's powering our revision control. And we made that decision for a couple of reasons. One being, it's where we see the industry going. I haven't heard of a lot of teams moving into SVN. I do hear a lot of teams moving out of it. Mm-hmm. And a lot of that is going to Git. And if you look at how software has evolved, they went through that transition like 5-10 years ago, and we see the hardware teams following a similar path over time. And the second reason being, it puts all of these teams into shared infrastructure. It makes it a lot easier to trial and collaborate with your firmware teams or with your software teams, and having a common language and a common methodology. Like you can do sub modules to connect with versions of firmware. You can do like backups and other Git repositories. And one of the other things that we realized as we were kind of scoping the initial version of the product was people were more and more adopting these Git tools. They were using GitHub, they were using GitLab, they're using Bitbucket. The problem is, as a hardware engineer, you only get about 10% of the functionality a software developer would get, because this is optimized for text-based code instead of for your visual drawings. So we didn't want to reinvent the wheel and come up with a new way of doing hardware. It's like there isn't an AllSpice way. What we're doing is applying these principles that a lot of teams already are familiar with and find intuitive, but make them work and give them 100% of the functionality that you would get in the equivalent software workflow. So a lot of our teams like that it is, again, based, and we have our own documentation, but you can also go Google how to do X on Git, and there's probably 3,000 Stack Overflow responses and tutorials, and there's just such an incredible community around it that makes it very easy to like learn if you're a beginner. And also it's very scalable, where you can start with like push, pull, commit and the basics, but it's incredibly powerful. So you can kind of go from beginner to intermediate to advanced, and there's more and more that you can do with it over time. So we kind of build it on Git. That's kind of one part. And the other decision that we made was to provide native integration for ECAD tools. So we started with Ultimate Designer, and we actually just released KiCad support as like a newest tool, and we're working on the different formats for different teams based on like the requests that we get. But that was the other decision that we made, where we see any export requirement as an opportunity for things to go wrong. And that's where a lot of the things happen, which is like, this is version 2, this is version 2-final,
right.
version 2-final, final, no, this time for real. And we try to avoid that and kind of put everything in a centralized rev control system where you're not sharing PDFs back and forth, which are like the death of like accuracy in a lot of these teams. And you can turn those into commits, into shareable links, and into things that are always tied to your history.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that sounds really incredible. I can already imagine, all the different ways this can speed up the process and help, like you said, just close those gaps of where miscommunication and issues pop up. I wanted to follow up. Something you said earlier was that when you were describing the name, you guys did have more simulation kind of component at one point in the product. So could you tell us a little bit about how it's evolved? Because you guys are a startup, right? And so with that comes lots of iterations and pivoting. So I'd love to hear kind of how it's evolved from the initial concept of what you guys thought the solution to look like to where you're at today.
Yeah, so we graduated in 2020 from grad school. And after that, we raised our pre-seed round. And the first thing we built on launch was actually our free diff tool, which is still available on our website, free to download. And it was one of those features that was table stakes in software that hardware didn't really have. So that's the first thing we built, and we launched that and used it to basically build a community and connect with as many engineers as we could to scope what the product or the fully featured platform should look like. We launched that, and then after, that's where we heard a lot of the issues happening on the collaboration layer, and basically people looking for a GitHub for hardware. And we went back and forth on how that should look like, and that's when we decided, it was like, based on what people like are telling us, it's like it should look like that, and it should feel like that, and it should operate the same way. So we scoped AllSpice Hub, which is our product. We went build that and onboarded an initial set of customers. There was more of a design partners that helped us kind of hone in into what really mattered, what didn't matter, and learn a ton about what features we needed to include, all the way to like, if nobody's talking about this feature, it's not getting built.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually probably as helpful just to know what not to build.
Of course.
And kind of scope the MVP. We raised our seed round, and we actually launched our hub to the public when we announced our seed round January 31st of last year. So almost a year to the date, and on a TechCrunch article. And yeah.
Nice. We're here for your anniversary.
Yeah, exactly. It's been, I always, it took me like a month to get used to that. Oh, it's not early this year anymore. It was last year at this point, and we're actually at the 1-year anniversary. So
awesome. Well, congratulations on that milestone.
Thanks.
And so I think it would be interesting to discuss sort of some of the competitors that are out there and why your product is, really stands out and differentiates, what makes it unique. And, it sounds like it really is almost like community grown, right? Like you've gotten a lot of feedback throughout the process of developing it from engineers and hearing their pain points. And it almost sounds like, it didn't really exist like the Git for hardware. But what would you say are some of the major competitors and how you all kind of compete?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's 3 main buckets, or what I will call the status quo based on the company. So on one end, you have, for smaller teams, what I would describe as a combination of general purpose tools. So that is PDF meets Excel meets Google Slide meets Paint markup. So that's kind of one side of the spectrum.
The DIY hacked together kind of process.
Exactly. There's a lot of like Google Slides that people kind of have a template or something like that, but it's not necessarily, it's a general purpose tool that they've created a process around. Right. So that's kind of one end of the spectrum. On the other end of the spectrum, if you go to very, very large enterprises, you may have a custom built system, right? So it will be something that's being contracted out, bespoke to them, unique to that company, and that feeds some of those needs. And not a lot of in between. So a lot of the teams that are stuck in this like well, we're too large or too complex for maybe some PDF and Excel, but we're going to go contract out a full software system for ourselves. What we saw over time was a lot of those teams ended up using software tools. So a lot of teams on GitHub, on GitLab, on Bitbucket, and basically spinning out a secondary set of repos based on off their firmware repos, off their software repos. And also happening because a lot of the times that's the same person. There's a lot of electrical engineers doing both hardware design and firmware design. Different combinations, sometimes 80% of their time, sometimes 5%, but a lot of them are the same human, right? And they're spending part of their time in this workflow and this set of tools, and then the rest of their time in this very completely different and disjointed ecosystem. So that's kind of where we wanted to be. And if you look at like historically how like what tools people had, it's there is, if you look at the stack of an electrical engineer or a hardware engineer, you have your ECAD tools, and those have different flavors based on the size of the company and based on kind of what the teams need. And then you have PLM systems. So PLM systems were developed for a lot of the same reasons. What has happened over time is PLM has become more and more of a operations tool, deployment tool. So if you think of the software analogies, which I love to draw the software analogies, I would put a PLM system as a continuous deployment tool, right? And a lot of the teams that we talk to and work with put their designs on a PLM system when they're 95% completed, which is, well, what happens between 0 and 95%? That could be 18 months on a product roadmap. That could be 9 months. That could be 10 months. And that's where like the alternatives were in like a lot of options there, which is why we wanted to kind of start and build something that helps these teams go from like the first day of the product all the way to like production ready and kind of connect to the rest of their stack seamlessly.
Absolutely. And so why do you think something I think about a lot, and I've kind of seen in some of your interviews before, that I think it's ironic almost that the electronics industry is using some of these antiquated methods, right? Like they're responsible for some of the most innovative technology, getting to the market. Yet, in our, in supply frames, industry and world, we're working with component, manufacturers and distributors that are still using Rolodex of contacts and Excel sheets and calling people up on the phone, to learn about the components they need and their sourcing and that sort of thing. So we talk about a lot, about digital transformation and how trying to kind of catch up this industry to the latest and greatest tools and be more efficient. Why do you think, these tools didn't exist until you guys were trying to tackle this, or people are stuck in kind of their old ways?
I think it's twofold. The first part is, until recently, they didn't need to, right? Before product development, a lot of the limitation was in the manufacturing side, right? And it took you several weeks or several months to get products back. So you didn't need tools that operated any faster because you were bottlenecked somewhere else. Nowadays, there's been a lot of innovation that makes that process significantly faster. And that industry has gone through like some revolution. If you think of like 3D printing, right? Now you can get prototypes, you can get like fast PCB manufacturing and like next day boards and like things that were like unthinkable several years back. But the tools are still stuck in the, well, it's going to take me 3 weeks to review something to release it. It's going to take me 2 days to get it manufactured, right? So now the tools need to kind of catch up to the rest of it. So until recently, maybe you didn't need to. And the second one is actually our theory is like it's a lack of resources. We actually recently ran a survey with like hundreds of engineers asking like, in our case, is like we think about adopting Git is like, what is the biggest blocker like to adopting this in your team? And it's not like I don't want to, and it's not like my team doesn't want to buy in. It's like I don't know where to go learn about this. It's like there's a ton of content that's built for software. There's a ton of content for other disciplines, but that's where we're also trying to bring to this space is like there's just so many questions about like how do these things apply to our specific industry? How does this like there is a lot of similarities, but there's also a lot of intricacies about electronics in particular that people have questions about. And we get a ton of questions of like, what are some best practices? Like, what should we be doing here? Like, when is something applicable or not? So just like resources and content is like I think, a big opportunity to kind of help the industry accelerate kind of the adoption of like what will be like new technologies.
We're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we'll hear more about where AllSpice is heading and how the pandemic brought awareness to digital collaboration. Welcome back to The Bomb. I'm Magenta Strongheart. Today we're speaking with Valentina Ratner, who's the co-founder and CEO of AllSpice. Earlier in the interview, we heard about the background of AllSpice and even what tools they're compatible with. Now we're going to hear from Valentina as she explains the evolution of the company and even what the future holds for AllSpice. In thinking about, where you see AllSpice going, what are you excited about for the future? And kind of, I would love to know what you imagine, like what would be do you have an idea already? I know it's still early, but of kind of a successful exit for you all? Like, would you want to be integrated into an ECAD, tool that's already out there? Would that be the dream, or kind of continue on and grow and scale alongside these solutions? Like, where do you kind of see it going?
If you think of how software evolved, right? First came revision control, then came collaboration, and then came automation, right? And we think about AllSpice the same way. And automation is, for us, the world of CI, continuous integration, right? So once you have your designs and your process and this infrastructure that's all data-driven, there's just so much opportunity to automate a lot of these tasks and build true agile pipelines where you can set up a test or 100 tests to do things for you, not at the end of the project when it's been 6 months and you can't go back and change resistor number 3 that you put on day 2, but where you can actually make a decision and like actually make a change. And it could be all the way from like, if you think in your space, in the supply space, is like, can you automate to like anytime there are manufacturers like change the status of a component going end of life? Can we get a flag for that? Can we get like a check on all of these things? Can we get like notifications when things go out of stock? Can we get like, can we set parameters if X changes by more than X%, then flag it as a fail, right? All the way to performance, and you can get into more of the back to like kind of where we started of like, then you can get more into like running simulations, like getting those results like on a regular basis every time you do a commit, rather than like having to put all this time and effort at the end, and making those truly automated tests that you can run basically anytime that you have a change.
Makes a ton of sense. Absolutely. And so I think we have like a really nice, clear picture of what AllSpice does. So thank you for that. I would love to learn more about kind of your personal journey alongside the growth of AllSpice, and maybe even before a little bit, take us back to what got you interested in engineering. As you mentioned, you studied mechanical engineering and then shifted to computer science and business. So I'd love to learn a little bit more about that evolution.
Yeah. Going all the way back. So I've always been interested in both. And it comes from my dad is an accountant by training, worked in business. My mom is a computer engineer by training, also worked in business. And I felt like growing up, I always wanted to be a little bit of both. But until junior year of high school, I always thought I would go into business, and I was kind of on a track to either study economics or something like that, and maybe go into accounting as well, as my dad did. And I had the opportunity to participate in this program where they will pair you with an executive in the space that you wanted to go into. And I got placed with a bank CEO. Best placement I could hope for. It was like my dream, and I was super excited. Like all my classmates were like, oh my God, you got like the best pairing ever. So I got to spend this day with this executive, like going to board meetings and reviewing the models and all of the work that they did. And I absolutely hated it. It was like the most boring day ever. And the best part of my day was sneaking out of a meeting to go hang out with the maintenance team and watching them fix an ATM machine. And I found that so much more fascinating. And I was very intrigued because I asked them, how does the machine know if it's a $5 bill or a $10 bill or a $20 bill, right? And they were explaining like the weights in the back and all these things. And I find like that's so much more interesting than like anything else that I had seen. That I guess it worked out in the end. That like
yeah,
I
you
came
learned
back
a lot
very,
that day. You knew
very
exactly
like
what you didn't
knowledgeable
want to
of
do.
like what I wanted to do. It wasn't what I expected, but I think at the end of that experience, I came back and I said like, I think I'm going to go into engineering.
That's awesome. I love that story. It's always like interesting to hear, what was that first moment that really like, inspired you to follow kind of the path you're on today. And that is a new one I haven't heard before, like seeing the inside of a bank machine and learning from that you wanted to be able to build and construct those things. So I love that. And so tell us a little bit more about kind of the journey into founding a startup. Like, is this something you saw yourself doing? It sounds like, you were interested in business from a young age. And once you knew that there was this kind of opportunity at the intersection of hardware and software, you were like, I want to take that on, as a challenge. But how has kind of the startup experience been? Maybe not what you were expecting, or exactly what you were expecting, or a little bit of both? I'd love to hear about that more.
Yeah. So I've always been interested in business, but I didn't know that I would go into, I guess, venture-backed startups. That was a new world that I discovered once I got to business school. So very new to me. I had worked at a big tech company, but I didn't have any exposure to startups. So that's something more that I actually learned while going through this dual-degree program and getting exposed to both from the investor side and founders into what that could be like. So I think interested there, but I didn't know it was gonna be like this, or it would have like this flavor of startups. So I've been very lucky. We've been very lucky and very excited to get here. I think that working with VCs, VCs can be incredible partners if you can find the right people for your industry, for your product, for your space that believe the same things that you believe in. And I think we've been lucky to find those people for us. And they're very helpful in giving you a 30,000 foot view of the market. So nobody knows our business better than we do, right? We live and breathe it every day, but we also only have like one data point of our business. I feel like one thing that's helpful from the venture side is kind of keeping kind of a high level view of like where the market is, right? They see like hundreds and thousands of companies and fundraises and product expansions and launches, and kind of giving you those insights and having that experience of having done it so many times and being able to kind of guide you into like what may work for you or may not based on like someone else's experience.
And so you all started AllSpice in 2020. You said you just celebrated 1 year of kind of being officially, funded and all of that. What was it like starting a company, first of all, in the middle of a global pandemic?
Oh, it was absolute madness. So Kyle and I were still in grad school. It was our last semester. And I remember meeting in January in person and talking about where we wanted to be based and where we wanted to fundraise. And we had like this amazing plan and our deck and everything ready. And I had all these meetings lined up for the second week of March. Worst timing in the history of fundraising. Obviously, everything got canceled. The war went to like a standstill. So it was a bit of a kind of a reality adjustment where we had to put our fundraising pause, and we kind of took that time and that opportunity to kind of focus on us and our product, went back and like just build a dev tool, kind of focus on what we could control, and ended up starting the race in the summer later. So we ended up racing at the end of the summer instead of like, we were like trying to line up the fundraise with our graduation to go immediately full time. And that didn't work out that way. It ended up working well, but it also had its, I guess, unexpected positives in terms of we being a remote team from the start, and we have learned how to be incredibly efficient and effective at that. And we also were advocating for digital collaboration for these teams 2 months before the pandemic started. And if anyone had any doubts that this was an issue, it became apparent very quickly after the pandemic happened that digital collaboration is kind of a must-have if a company wants to operate well. So it didn't it shifted from like, is this a problem, to how are we going to solve this problem, which
Right.
made it, it just made adoption and kind of the interest a lot higher at that point.
I bet. I was going to say, if anything, you had even more examples of everyone needing to transition immediately to like remote collaborative teams and spaces to be able to do that and still be able to work efficiently, of course. So
Yeah, I think it's been like back-to-back crisis for us that we just happened to be in the middle of. And then after we learned how to do things remotely during COVID, came the chip supply shortage.
Mhm.
And then that's another full kind of worms, which is like, well, if you didn't think your supply chain needed support, now you definitely do.
Absolutely.
And everyone is still dealing with the repercussions, and teams are asking for like, how can we be more flexible? How can we react? Is like one of the examples, and one of my favorite quotes is someone said, like, I feel like I'm playing whack-a-mole. I send a quote, I get it back. It's like, something is out of stock and it takes me 3 weeks to validate a new part. And by the time I validated a new recommendation, that part is also now out of
Oh my
stock. And I'm kind of
goodness,
like
yeah.
back to square one. So it's like, how can we do these things quickly? Which is a lot of the kind of inspiration, and any features that were related to that kind of made it to the top of our list really
Yeah.
quickly in the roadmap. And we've kind of been reprioritizing with our customers based on kind of how the world is shaping up.
Definitely. So is there anything else you wanted to add as far as the future of AllSpice, or anything you want to share on that note?
Besides the product, the kind of the two other parts are growing our team. So we have been hiring steadily. We get more requests of things to do that we can get to. So looking to grow the team with people that believe in what we believe in and want to kind of bring this get workflows into the hardware space. And then the other one is kind of growing with our customers. We have seen, we started with SMB teams. And another interesting thing that we saw happening last year was a ton of pull and inbound from enterprise companies. So smaller teams that work within large organizations that want to adopt some of these tools and want to have that flexibility of like operating in a Git style workflow. So tons of product to be built.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the two cool things that we've recently done is talked about it, but we just released KiCad support. So we've been kind of growing
that's
that.
huge.
And then the next one is we actually just released also the ability to self-sign up on our website. So until recently, again, we were very involved, Kyle and I, on every onboarding. And now we're trying to kind of make it a lot easier for people to like discover it by themselves, like get a taste for the product, see a demo project, and like signing up like whenever they're ready on their own terms and things like that.
That's so exciting. And so you said that some small parts of enterprise organizations are reaching out about the solution. What would you say is your sweet spot right now as far as the types of teams you serve, the size of teams, how many people, and what their focus is as far as their part of the organization?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I would say our sweet spot is teams of like 3 seems to be like the lower end in terms of a 3 is when coordination between people gets a little trickier. Right. So 3+, and then probably 3 to 20 is probably our sweet spot. For SMBs companies, that may be the entire team. For an enterprise company, that could be 1 team out of 20 that's building a much more complex product or multiple types of products within the same organization. So that's kind of the sweet spot. And in terms of industries, we decided not to specialize in industry. That was another kind of discovery over the last year. The underlying process, the basics of it are pretty similar. Like the way that you like design and validate boards, be it a toaster board or an autonomous vehicle board or a medical device board. Every industry has their own regulations and compliance, and some of the names may be called differently, but in terms of like the needs of the teams, we find it like to be pretty common. So we actually work with teams in consumer electronics, 3D printing, autonomous vehicles, medical devices, robotics, and design firms, and like anything in between. So pretty broad when it comes to like hardware products.
Got it. Okay. Well, thank you so much for all the details on AllSpice. We want to be sensitive of your time here today, so we're just going to wrap it up with a couple of quick questions at the end here. What is one thing outside of tech that's inspiring you these days?
Something that's been inspiring for me has been going back to school and talking to students. Actually, in last year, a former professor, which is now an investor, wrote a case study about AllSpice and some of the decisions that we're making. And we had the opportunity to go in and hear 270 students talk about our company and the decisions we should be making and how we're really thinking about it. And it was just so inspiring to see. It's in a class called Launching Technology Ventures. And just seeing all these people super excited about either starting their own companies or joining early stage startups. And there's a ton of risk associated with data and uncertainty, but it's such a thrilling ride that if I can just inspire someone to like take the plunge and either start the company or like join that early stage startup, even if it seems like a bit risky, it's like that makes me super happy.
Yeah, that's so fun. Like a full circle moment for you all. That's great. And what is something in technology that's inspiring you?
Something in technology. Oof. I don't know. I'm going to have to think about that one.
Maybe just the engineers you talk to every day. You're like, no, I'm sick of them.
I love talking to our customers. A good day for me is spending a lot of time speaking with people, either prospective customers and hearing what they're looking for, or existing customers and hearing what's working for them and what they want to see. So I feel like that's probably one of the most energizing parts of the job. It's like there's nothing like as exciting as when where like you see the teams be like, oh my God, I've been looking for this for 10 years. Like, and I always wanted to have something like this. And now we do. And all the way to like, we work very closely with customers, and I'll talk to them as often as they want to talk to me. And hearing, for example, it's like, what are some of the things that you want to like see in the product, get added or evolved or new features. And my favorite is when they mention things that are on our roadmap, which is like, that's exactly where we want to be. It's like, we want to be close to their needs, and it's like hearing things that they want to see that we're already working on is kind of a great indication for us that like we've stayed close enough that we kind of have a good pulse on what these teams are looking for.
Totally. That's got to be so validating. You're like, oh, it's noted. It's on the board. It's going to happen. That's great.
I was like, that sounds great. Give me like 3 weeks and let's check it back in. Yeah,
definitely. That's got to be a good feeling to be able to say that. And last but not least, what is on your personal bill of materials?
My personal bill of materials. I'm gonna go with my AirPods. I love my AirPods, and they are like my daily companion. I spend, as I said, a lot of time on calls, and that's kind of like my focus, where like I just filter out the rest of the world and I'm like present and I'm here and I'm talking to you, even if it is on Zoom and it's not live, all the way to like, I'm just going to pump music when I'm trying to get things done. So I will say my AirPods are like my daily +1.
Love that. I also am a big fan of my AirPods. I will say though, I wonder if you've had this experience. Are you dissatisfied with the case when you drop it? Do you ever drop the case and the AirPods fly out in different directions? I have like a personal vendetta against Apple for this, because maybe I just drop my case way too much, but I'm like, this is a design flaw. Like the case should not pop open. It should close and protect the earbuds.
Interesting.
The AirPods.
I consider myself pretty clumsy when it comes to dropping things. I routinely drop my phone. I haven't tried dropping my AirPods.
Well, don't do it, because they will fly out very close to like, the drain cover in the street, and you'll be stressed out. This is my experience way too often, but maybe I just need to like put a little case around the case or something.
Yeah, maybe.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Valentina. I'm really excited to follow along the journey of AllSpice, and we're going to be catching up with one of your investors actually in a couple episodes with Chrissy Meyer. So excited to follow up with her and Root Ventures as well in the future.
Amazing. Thanks so much for having me today. It's been a blast.
Thank you, Valentina, for sharing the story of AllSpice and telling us more about this amazing platform you've created. Thank you to everyone for listening. I'm Magenta Strongheart, and this is The Bomb. If you like The Bomb, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and share the show wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow Supplyframe and Hackaday on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Design Lab at Supplyframe Design Lab on Instagram and Twitter. The Bomb is a Supplyframe podcast produced by me, Magenta Strongheart, and Ryan Tillotson. Written by Maggie Bowles and edited by Daniel Ferreira. Theme music is by Anna Hogbin, show art by Thomas Schneider. Special thanks to Giovanni Salinas, Bruce Dominguez, Thomas Woodward, Jin Kumar, Jordan Clark, the entire Supply Frame team, and you, our wonderful listeners. I'm your host, Magenta Strongheart. See you next week.